Thank you, Tony and Tim, if he's still here. And my time is not all that precious. I do have something at 2, though. Um, but thank you all. Obviously, this was mostly review for me from Tim. I'm glad you all got to hear this sobering news. And we are definitely going to be wrestling with a lot of budget issues, even pre-HR1, right? Even pre the consequence of HR1, we have a lot of issues around how CCOs are reimbursing providers in particular. And as you know, someone who still sees patients several days a week, it's getting harder and harder to do this work and to pencil it out. So those are kind of bigger topic discussions. I am excited, though, to share with you a bill that I am presenting as a committee bill for the Senate Interim Committee on Early Childhood and Behavioral Health. And it's really aimed at trying to prevent cannabis use disorder, which our youth are at particularly high risk for. So we're calling it the Safer Access to Marijuana Act, looking at 3 issues around potency, packaging, and placement. Next slide, please. And thank you, Annalise, for setting this up. So, as I said, the goal here is to prevent cannabis use disorder, which we know is a risk factor for chronic psychosis. I've shared before in several spaces that I have my brother Patrick, who's a couple years older than me, has severe chronic schizoaffective disorder. And I'm persuaded that even the 1970s marijuana contributed to the development of his life-limiting mental illness. And of course, we want to prevent cannabis misuse, unintended overconsumption of THC for all Oregonians, but especially kids. Next slide, please. So I think most of you guys know this. I know I'm preaching to the choir here that today's cannabis is a lot stronger than its predecessors, as much as 10 times the amount of THC. And I think most people aren't aware of this, and maybe they have this idea of what I'm going to consume, and thinking back to what they've seen people consume in movies or whatever it is, not realizing that they're actually consuming quite a bit more THC. And we see this both in emergency room visits, but also in escalating, I guess, getting habituated to a certain THC level and needing even more. And then, of course, we know that the frequent use and the use of these high potency products themselves increase the risk of addiction as well as cannabis use disorder, which I've touched on earlier. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here's the link between the high potency cannabis and the increased odds of psychotic disorders. Thank you. And then next slide. This is the situation where people think of cannabis as relatively unharmful. In fact, it's got the biggest gap between perceived risk and actual risk among a lot of these substances. People really are like, well, it comes from a plant, I'm just like, oh my gosh. But anyway, next slide. And this shows that when Oregon changed its packaging to allow for more milligrams of THC per package, whereas Washington did not, we saw an increase in 0 to 5-year-olds having THC toxicity presenting to emergency rooms. And then next slide. So the bill that I am proposing, and I'll be really honest, the actual bill language was sent to me Friday afternoon, and I have not read it yet. I apologize. But I've met with the drafter several times, and I think we're all on the same page. But it's the potency. So limiting the THC content to each unit of an edible should be Christopher's read it. Christopher's here. Thank you, Christopher, my chief of staff, for 5 more days. Limit the content of edibles to 10 milligram per unit. And again, you guys probably all know this, but I always think of the gummy edibles can have as much as 10 servings of THC in it. or I think maybe 5 servings. And so, like, are we picturing people like cutting off the little feet of the gummy bear? We also want to end the infusion of additional THC into a flower or pre-rolls. I would really love to have lower potency of the actual primary product. That's a little bit challenging, and I'm available in the future if anyone here has any ideas to things that are already being grown and processed to change their actual core potency, but certainly we don't want it to be juiced up. The other thing I will say that's proving a challenge is trying to limit potency in vape. So we're not addressing that with this bill, but I would like to address that going forward. And then number two, packaging, which is to require single unit packaging. So a 10 milligram unit of THC should be individually wrapped. And this is to, again, to prevent the toddlers from getting THC toxicity from, eating, especially the candy looking versions, whether it's chocolate or gummies. And then we're really looking at this is modeled a little bit on a California bill for prominent warning labels about the risk of long-term mental health problems. And when California had a similar bill, which didn't get over the finish line, they called it the right to know. And that's really how I think about this. I think people don't realize what risk they're taking, especially young people, when if they're habitually using marijuana. And then placement is around allowing local governments to be a little bit to be stricter when there's compelling reason on the size and place of the buffer zones um, when um, when they uh, when they cite their stores. And next slide.
Sorry, it's not moving. One second. Oh, I
Okay.
think that's the end of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that might be the end of it. Yeah. So I know it's a pretty quick summary. We'll be having, some robust public hearings on this once short session starts. I did present this to my committee in December legislative days, so I'll probably just touch on it tomorrow. Will be and I'm sorry, it's Wednesdays when my committee meets. The LCs will be filed and be part of the public record, and then we'll be dropping the bill on Friday.